June the 1st, 2026, Santa Clara, California. The heat had settled into the stadium like a held breath, thick and unmoving, the kind of heat that makes a crowd of 70,000 people go quiet before kickoff, simply to conserve their strength for what is coming. Folarin Balogun had just done the one thing every striker dreams of and almost none ever achieve. He had scored, in the first half in a World Cup knockout match, for his country. For a moment, for one single gleaming moment, he was untouchable. The kind of untouchable that does not last, the kind that never does. He did not know it yet, but the same match that made him a hero would within the hour make him something else entirely. A name in a legal document. A case number. A test of how far a superpower would go to protect one of its own. 64 minutes on the clock. A loose ball. A tangle of legs near the touchline. Nothing, on the surface, that the world would remember. And somewhere 6,000 miles away in an office in Zurich, a decision was already being prepared that had nothing to do with the referee on the pitch and everything to do with the world beyond it. Every World Cup needs a golden boy. It is an old and merciless tradition. One player, chosen not by committee but by circumstance, asked to carry a host nation's entire emotional weight on his shoulders. In the summer of 2026, staged for the first time on American soil, that boy was Folarin Balogun. He was 24 years old, sharp-shouldered, quick-footed, the product of an American passport and an English football education. A striker assembled, almost too neatly, for exactly this stage. 4 matches into the tournament, he had scored 3 goals. He was, by some distance, the United States' most dangerous forward, and perhaps the closest thing this young footballing nation had ever produced to a genuine idol. There is a particular kind of hope that grows around a host nation's best player. It is heavier than ordinary hope. It carries expectation and marketing and a fragile football pride that a country has spent decades trying to earn on the world stage. All of it balanced impossibly on one pair of boots. Mauricio Pochettino, the manager who had staked his own reputation on building a team around this generation, had said as much before the tournament ever began, that Balogun was the difference, the player who turned good into dangerous. A manager does not say such things lightly. He was, in his own quiet way, placing a bet. And on that stifling night against Bosnia and Herzegovina, the bet appeared to be paying off. Everything was proceeding exactly as the script demanded. The Americans were leading. Balogun had scored. 10 men on the pitch were playing with the freedom that only a 2-goal cushion allows. The freedom of men who believe, however briefly, that the night already belongs to them. But football does not care for scripts. It has never cared for scripts. It has spent a century humbling men who believed otherwise. And in the 64th minute, the aura cracked. It began, as these things so often do, with something almost too small to notice, a fraction of a second, a shift of weight, the kind of contact that happens 100 times in a match and means nothing at all. Balogun, chasing a loose ball against Bosnian defender Tariq Muharemovic, planted his foot. The ankle beneath it turned. On first viewing, the referee Rafael Claus of Brazil did not even reach for a card. Play continued. It looked, to the naked eye, like nothing at all, the ordinary, forgettable violence of the game. But somewhere above the stadium, in a darkened room full of screens, a VAR official was watching the same moment in slow motion, frame by frame, and seeing something else entirely. A boot dragging down the back of a leg, an ankle rolling beneath the full weight of a falling body. The kind of detail that only exists at 12 frames a second, invisible to everyone inside the stadium, and yet suddenly, irrevocably, the only thing that mattered. Claus was summoned to the monitor. He watched again. The stadium waited, the way stadiums always wait for these verdicts. A silence with an edge to it, thousands of people holding the same breath. And when he turned back toward the pitch, he was no longer carrying a yellow card. He was carrying a red one. Balogun's face in that instant told its own small tragedy. Disbelief first, then something quieter. Something that does not photograph well but is somehow always visible anyway. The particular numbness of a man watching his own night dissolve in real time, watching the story rewrite itself around him without his consent. He walked from the pitch alone, past his own bench, into the tunnel, into the dark. Nobody reached out to stop him. There was nothing left to say. The United States held on. They won 2-0. But nobody in that dressing room was celebrating the scoreline. Mauricio Pochettino, in the press conference afterwards, could not hide his fury. "For me, never is it a red card," he said. "There was never any intention. That is why, for me, it is never a red card." A manager's grief, dressed up as an argument. His players echoed him. Weston McKennie, blunt and unguarded, called the whole situation a bit bogus. An entire dressing room wounded not by defeat, but by the peculiar shape of victory itself, hollowed out by an absence that had not yet even begun. Because Balogun's suspension was automatic. FIFA's own rulebook, Article 10.5, restated in Circular Number 16, repeated at every coordination meeting before every match of this tournament, was unambiguous. A red card meant a 1-match ban. No appeal. No exceptions. Not for the tournament's most dangerous forward, not for the host nation, not for anyone. That at least was the theory, or so everyone believed. Because 3 days later, on the eve of the round of 16 against Belgium, the rule that had never once been broken in more than 60 years of World Cup history, not for Pelé, not for Maradona, not for anyone who had ever worn a nation's colors, was broken for Folarin Balogun. The New York Times reported that President Donald Trump had personally telephoned FIFA President Gianni Infantino, asking him to review the suspension. FIFA's disciplinary committee then invoked Article 27 of its own code, a clause allowing a punishment to be suspended rather than served, and declared that Balogun's ban would not be enforced. Not overturned on football grounds, not because the red card was wrong, simply paused. Suspended for 1 year on probation, like a man handed a suspended prison sentence rather than a pardon. Belgium's Football Federation called it astonishing. UEFA, Europe's governing body, released a statement dripping with disbelief, warning that when the certainty of rules is no longer guaranteed by its guardians, the integrity of the game is at stake. Belgium's coach, Rudi Garcia, standing in front of the cameras, could barely conceal his contempt. "I didn't know that at the World Cup the 5th of July is actually the 1st of April. It's April Fools." Belgium demanded an emergency appeal. For a few hours it seemed the reversal might itself be reversed. A suspension of a suspension, a decision undone before it had even had the chance to breathe. FIFA's appeals committee convened through the night before Monday's kickoff, while lawyers on 2 continents argued over a document that decided, in the end, nothing about the tackle itself and everything about who was allowed to ask the questions. And in the end, the appeal was dismissed, not technically on its merits, but on a technicality of standing. Belgium, FIFA ruled, was not a party to the original case, and therefore had no right to challenge it at all. A door closed before it had properly opened. Folarin Balogun would play. There is only one precedent in the entire history of this tournament for what happened to him. It belongs to a man named Manuel Francisco dos Santos. The world knew him as Garrincha. In 1962, sent off in the World Cup semi-final, Garrincha was cleared by an emergency ruling to play in the final. Brazil won the tournament. History remembers Garrincha as a genius, rarely as a man who was given a second chance that the rulebook said he should never have received. Legends, it seems, have a way of absorbing their own controversies, smoothing them over with time until only the glory remains visible. 64 years passed before it happened again. And so the question that will follow Folarin Balogun for the rest of his career is not really about him at all. It is about what football has become, and who in the end is truly permitted to bend its own laws. A young man did not ask for this, he asked only to play. Was justice finally done, a wrongful red card corrected by whatever channel proved necessary, however unorthodox? Or was a global institution in front of the entire watching world shown to answer not to its own rulebook, but to whichever government happens to be hosting the trophy at the time? Gianni Infantino insisted that FIFA's judicial bodies remain independent, that they operate autonomously, and answer only to the facts before them. Yet the timeline tells its own quiet story. A phone call, a review of reversal, all inside 72 hours, all timed precisely to a knockout match against Belgium. Coincidences in football are rarely as innocent as they claim to be. Whatever Folarin Balogun does next, however many goals he scores, however far his country advances through this tournament, his name is now permanently attached to a sentence that has nothing to do with football at all. The first player in over 60 years whose ban was lifted not by the game's own internal logic, but by the sheer weight of a telephone call from the most powerful office on earth. Perhaps that is the real tragedy here, not a red card, not even a presidency reaching into the machinery of a football match, but the quiet, permanent stain left on a young man's greatest tournament, a shadow he did not choose, will not be able to explain away, and can never quite outrun, no matter how many goals he scores from here. Because in the end, the record books will simply say he played, they will not say why, and somewhere in that silence between the fact and the reason lies everything this story was ever really about.